Okay, so there I was, just humbly browsing Reddit, looking for a video idea because honestly, I could not come up with one for the life of me this week. And I found a thread from 2 years ago of a bunch of people getting together to try and come up with the absolute worst D&D game possible. Like, this isn't bad D&D advice. I mean, it is, but like, it goes a step further than that. These are just straight up awful ideas that would completely ruin any sort of game. And I thought, it's perfect. I mean, we pride ourselves on pulling out the best from the worst here at Crispy's Tavern. So therefore, today, we are going to be sailing through the sea of misery. We're going to be looking at some truly god-awful D&D ideas, because I think you're going to be surprised by how common some of these things really are in your average everyday game, and I think you'd be surprised at how many lessons we can take from it. So without further ado, let's get started. First up, everything is a mimic. This is a mistake I made in my second D&D homebrew campaign. Basically, the theme of a dungeon was that there's a lot of mimics in there. The mage inside is crazy paranoid and scared of an ultra-powerful being, and therefore he filled his dungeon with mimics, and the party had to traverse through that experience. And yeah, it was really, really funny during that session, but unfortunately, because of how I ran it, making literally everything a mimic, and then proceeding to use mimics pretty liberally throughout a lot of my campaign, my party grew a little bit too paranoid when it comes to just using anything, really, and I think that is kind of a problem. The player behavior that you punish is player behavior that you discourage. Pointy Hat did a really good video on the flaw with mimics, and I disagree that mimics are 100% bad. I mean, he wasn't saying that, by the way, but there are people who think that mimics shouldn't be used ever. I think they can be fun. They are a cool little gag villain to add into a combat, but I do think if they are overused, it can be a serious problem. I mean, yeah, it's not going to end your game or anything, but my game did invariably slow down because my players kept on taking their sweet time when it came to chests or potions or books or what have you. And you know what? The problem is, I can't even blame them for that. I mean, they are being reasonable considering they've been screwed over by mimics in the past. Mimics are like a party trick. When you use them, they're great, but if you overuse them, it gets really annoying really fast. A good mimic is a mimic that is used sparingly, and a mimic that's used in a smart scenario. Mimics are often used exactly like traps. They pop up, they attack you, but mimics are a creature. They have a stat block. They are used in combat encounters. I often forget that I can implement mimics into a combat scenario, and with especially Matt Colville's Flea Mortals mimics, another plug, sorry, those mimics can be really fun. Mimics are a pretty challenging CR3 monster with a decent stat block, even when you're using the vanilla ones. Add them into a combat encounter as well. You'd be surprised by how fun they are just out in the open in combat. Also, remember that everything can be a mimic. Maybe don't make everything a mimic, but remember that anything can turn into one. It doesn't just need to be chess. I know this is advice that you hear all the time, but a lot of people forget about that. I very rarely see mimics popping up as books or potions or cabinets or beds or entire taverns. MCDM made a mimic that was an entire street. That kind of thing is really cool and evolves the mimic fantasy past just a cheap chess trap. Look, I think mimics are awesome. Don't make everything a mimic, but remember that they can be a lot of fun when used right. Let them create their characters and TPK them within the first 10 minutes of your session. Now, obviously, a lot of DMs know not to do that, but man, sometimes you overestimate the power of those early player characters. I don't know about you guys, but designing encounters gets easier as players level up. There's like a curve to it. Like, it's kind of hard for me at first through 3rd level, but after level 5 or so, it gets pretty easy, and level 10 is where I'm in my sweet spot, and then past level 15 is when I'm struggling just that little bit. That bell curve of encounter design obviously applies mostly just to myself. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but especially at early levels, you can have some serious problems with accidentally TPKing the party. Like, you don't realize your wizard only has like 6 hit points until you're hitting them with 7 hit points of damage. This is especially a problem when you're dealing with inexperienced players. There's nothing like being a brand new player, Dungeons & Dragons, fresh off the boat, you get into your first game, and then you die instantly. How fun is that? At least when you're DMing for like 20th level characters, the problem you're facing is probably that the encounters are too easy. And at least then, the players are living through the experience. When you're DMing for early levels and you don't know how to encounter design or encounter build, yeah, the problem is that you might kill them all, which is a whole other issue. For me, I just kind of skip over this problem. I have my players start at level 3, which I'm a bit more comfortable with, and then move from there. I also have like 5 players, which is more than most people DM for, so I get to skirt this issue. But when I'm DMing my actual plays, for example, a big problem I faced was that I had less players, and therefore my encounters were built way too hardcore. And yeah, I made for thrilling combats, but it was really stressful for me. What I'm trying to say is, TPKing within the first 10 minutes, like, yeah, it sounds ridiculous, but it's more than possible if you're not encounter building in a smart way. I would stray towards making the combat, especially for new players and especially early levels, I would stray towards making them on the easier side. Look, I love an intense combat. You know how I run my games, or at least most of you guys who stick around know how I run my games, but even I've got to admit, when you're DMing for early levels, I wouldn't take that risk. It's okay to run a couple easy combats. Allow your players to have those wins, and then slowly build up the difficulty. That shock and awe early combat where a giant ogre bursts in and kicks everyone's butt, that is interesting, but it can be deadly in a way that you really don't want. Also remember that TPK doesn't necessarily need to lead to death. I mean, yeah, usually they do, but a TPK could also be a total party capture instead. I've always wanted to do that, but I never follow through. But you can. A total party kill doesn't have to have a kill in the thing. It can be something else that allows your party to make it on to the next day if your encounter balance isn't up to snuff. Look, we all make mistakes. What matters is recovering from them, and you can do that without killing your entire party. You need a DMPC. You guys know how I feel about this one. I will die on the hill that NPC allies in the form of some sort of DMPC can work, okay? I know that there's a lot of whinging about what the definition of a DMPC is, and a lot of people just define it as NPC allies that are bad, which, I mean, sure, you can do that. But yeah, I am of the opinion that creating an NPC that tags along with the party, it can work if you just don't be an idiot about it. A big reason why DMPCs don't work is because they're either way over leveled and overshadow the party, or they overshadow the party in a narrative sense, taking up too much space. I actually do that last thing a lot on accident. I like talking, I like role-playing, and my party, my home game party, not the ones you watch on my channel, they are pretty minimal when it comes to roleplay. They are not super big role players, and that is okay, by the way. That's the style that I run with, it's the style I'm used to, but I love role-playing. I love talking in character, and sometimes that results in me kind of stepping on them. I need to be conscientious of that as a dungeon master, making sure, like, hey, I know my party are minimal role players, but I still need to give them room to roleplay, especially since in this third campaign, they're really coming out of their shell. I need to shut the heck up sometimes and let them do their thing, especially if I'm playing an NPC. NPCs should never be taking the spotlight. I'm of the opinion that a big reason this can work is because an NPC, just a side character, can be beloved by your characters. However, if they're stealing the spotlight away from them, that's a recipe for all the party hating somebody very, very quickly. Another big thing is using these NPCs in combat. That's where the over-leveling thing comes in. If an NPC is over-leveled and overshadows the party in combat, that can get really, really irritating. However, I think there is a neat solution to this. Number one, don't make the NPC over-leveled. Number two, let the party control them. I, for one, hate controlling friendly NPCs in combat. I despise doing that, especially since my combats are complicated enough as is. I don't need to keep track of an NPC ally on top of it. So, my solution was just send the stat block to my players. The stat sheets are meant to be very, very simple. Just 2 normal attacks and some modifications they can do to those attacks. For example, Marin Luzada here can use her glaive, she can use her sling, and she can dash, and she can heal. That's it. Not only does this clear up some room for you as the Dungeon Master to focus on controlling the enemies that you're supposed to be controlling, but also, I think this results in the players getting very attached to NPCs. I mean, seriously, my party love Marin. The amount of stuff they've gone through to save this woman is insane. I'm not even going to try to detail it here. And I think part of that is, number one, she's a likable character. But number two, they are closer to her because they fought alongside her. Instead of me controlling her, they did. My players are much more aware of their own tactics, and therefore they can integrate Marin into what they're doing much easier, and therefore they grow close to her. If you want your players to like the NPCs that you are trying to integrate into their adventure, this is not a bad way to do it. So basically what I'm trying to say is, DMPCs can work, or NPC allies can work, whatever you want to call them. But if they don't work, they really don't work. And if you can't make them work, don't do them at all. Everyone starts with the deck of many things. Oh boy, yeah, the deck of many things is an interesting item. I think it is one of the most infamous items in D&D for a really fun reason. A lot of people like it. It introduces an element of chaos that people enjoy. However, a lot of DMs can sometimes not be ready to deal with the consequences of a deck of many things draw. I mean, heck, if Matt Mercer can be caught by the deck of many things, you sure can be too. And you know what? That's okay. The element of chaos is part of what makes the deck fun, but that element of chaos isn't necessary for every game. If you don't want to deal with the deck's shenanigans, if there's a card that can be drawn from the deck that would make your game a pain in the butt to run, I just wouldn't add it in the first place. Like, yeah, some cards in the deck are really, really cool. The devil card that makes a devil enemy follow the party around, I think that could be really interesting for roleplay. And in fact, in my third campaign, I think it could create some awesome encounters, specifically because the House of Devils is a major part of the story. However, what if my party don't draw the devil card? What if they draw something else? What if they draw something like the wish card, and now great, I have to deal with the burden of my party having 1d4 wishes. That's not a pain in the butt at all. You know, if there's a card in there that you don't want them to draw, I think that breaks the point of the deck of many things a little bit. That's why I've never integrated it. Like, yeah, some of these cards could be so much fun, but there's a bunch of them that I just don't want to deal with. And yeah, I could lie. I could fudge the cards, have my party draw some just normal playing cards, and just say, oh wow, that just so happens to be the card I wanted you to draw. But at that point, why do it at all? You know what I mean? The deck of many things brings chaos. If you want chaos, great. If you don't need to use it. Curse of Strahd, but don't actually buy the actual printed Curse of Strahd module. Just look up all the horror stories and threads asking for advice on how to run it, then write up a disjointed outline based on what you've read from various subs. Okay, the reason I'm laughing is because originally I wrote up a sequel for today on how to run Curse of Strahd and why there are so many Curse of Strahd horror stories. I ended up dropping it because it was too similar to my old video. Still might make it in the future, but yeah, I just thought that was a fun little coincidence. Curse of Strahd. Yeah, there are a lot of Curse of Strahd horror stories. There's a variety of reasons for that, the primary one being that Curse of Strahd is very popular, and therefore a lot of people run it, and therefore there are going to be a lot of bad things that happen. It's just inevitable. On top of that, Curse of Strahd is a module that a lot of new players jump into, and it's a module that's not easy for everybody to roleplay in because it has darker themes. Darker themes are not the easiest thing to roleplay, especially when compared to a more lighthearted adventure like Lost Mines of Fendelver. On top of that, Strahd himself is a villain that everybody has a different idea on. Some people want Strahd to be a completely malevolent bad guy. Some people want him to be sympathetic. Some people want him to be a woman. No, I'm not making that up. And you know what? All of those ideas are valid and cool, but because there are so many different ideas, so many different points of advice, a lot of people who try to jump in and run the game get really confused and don't have a unified vision for who Strahd is. And Strahd is kind of an important part of the module. His name takes up a not insignificant amount of the title after all. So yeah, how do you fix these problems? I don't have all the answers for you, I'm not going to lie. My own Curse of Strahd game ended quite badly, so I'm not exactly a perfect lesson. I think a big part of it is, number one, finding people who are actually going to buy into Curse of Strahd. Unless you're cool with converting the module into something jokey, you need to find people who are going to accept the darker aspects of the game. It's kind of like going to a haunted house. If you've ever been to a haunted house with jokey friends, it becomes very not scary very, very quickly. And me and my friends always try to go through a haunted house independent of everyone else, because we know if there are other parties alongside us, we are going to ruin the experience for them, and we don't want to do that. The problem is, if you're running D&D and not everyone's on the same page, then yeah, that experience is going to be ruined. You need a party of people, a whole group of people who are going to buy into that horror, who are going to take the haunted house seriously. If they're not taking it seriously, well, you might be better off running something else. Not to say that you can't joke in Curse of Strahd, you can't have a funny Curse of Strahd game. I mean, one of the most famous Curse of Strahd games is Dice Camera Action. That party was called the Waffle Crew. They weren't exactly the most serious of parties ever. And that's okay. but you just need to be ready for what you're going to be running. Find players who are going to buy into what kind of fantasy you're going to create. This isn't just Curse of Strahd advice. I think this is advice for every sort of D&D module. Hopefully that advice made sense. I just took an entire video advice and just crammed it into like a couple minutes, so I have no idea how that went, but yeah, anyway. All right, this kind of brought in a bunch of like cut video ideas, which I didn't expect, but if you guys enjoyed it, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of our content, then you can check out RPG Horror Stories. We just released our massive marathon episode filled with incredible skits for you to enjoy. It's linked in the cards. While you're there, subscribe to Crispy Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own tips or thoughts, go down in the comments down below. If you can't leave a comment, leave the comment. Literally the worst ideas. So let me know I made it to the end of the video. And that's like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Farewell.